The blood-red sun dipped beneath the horizon as Beau Quincy rode toward his humble ranch house, his shoulders sagging with the weight of raising 8-year-old Charlotte alone for the past 3 years. Life in Silverdale, Wyoming Territory, had never been easy, but since Mary's passing during that merciless winter of 1873, each day felt like an uphill battle against an invisible enemy that threatened to consume what little joy remained in his world. Charlotte sat on the porch steps, her small fingers working nimbly at a piece of rawhide, attempting to fashion something resembling the braided horsehair bracelets her mother once made. Her golden hair, so like Mary's, fell across her face, concealing the tears that had become as much a part of her daily routine as feeding the chickens or helping her father prepare their meager suppers. "Papa's home," she announced to no one in particular, setting aside her handiwork and wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand. She had become skilled at hiding her sadness, though Beau saw through the brave facade she maintained. "There's my little wildflower," Beau called, his deep voice carrying across the yard as he dismounted his chestnut gelding, Thunder. His weathered face crinkled into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. At 34, lines had etched themselves deep around his mouth and across his forehead, making him appear a decade older. "Did you bring any supplies from town?" Charlotte asked, rising to her feet and brushing dust from her faded calico dress. "Got flour, sugar, and even some peppermint sticks," Beau replied, reaching into his saddlebag to extract a small paper packet. "And a letter came for us." Charlotte's eyes widened. "A letter from who?" "Looks to be from your Aunt Josephine in Chicago," Beau said, studying the elegant handwriting on the envelope. "We'll read it after supper." As they walked into the modest 2-room cabin, Charlotte fell silent. The evening routine unfolded, as it always did, Beau tending to chores, while Charlotte set the table with their mismatched plates and bent utensils. The cabin walls, once brightened by Mary's watercolor paintings and carefully arranged wildflowers, had grown dull and lifeless over the years. After a simple meal of beans and cornbread, Beau broke the seal on Josephine's letter. His eyes moved across the page, his expression growing more troubled with each line. "What does it say, Papa?" Charlotte asked, leaning forward. Beau cleared his throat. "Your Aunt Josephine is getting married again. She says she can take you to Chicago, put you in a proper school." He set the letter down, his calloused fingers trembling slightly. "Says a young girl needs a woman's guidance." Charlotte's lower lip quivered. "I don't want to go to Chicago. I want to stay here with you." "I'd never send you away, Charlotte," Beau reassured her, reaching across the table to squeeze her small hand. "This is your home." Later that night, after tucking Charlotte into bed, Beau sat on the porch, nursing a glass of whiskey and staring at the star-filled sky. Mary had loved these Wyoming nights, claiming the stars were close enough to touch. Now they just seemed cold and distant, much like the future stretching before him. The truth that Beau wouldn't admit aloud was that Josephine might be right. Charlotte needed more than he could give her: a mother's touch, feminine wisdom, proper schooling. But the thought of sending his daughter away tore at his heart like barbed wire. Morning came with a determination that had been absent for months. Beau decided they would manage somehow. He'd hire someone to help around the ranch, and perhaps even teach Charlotte her letters more properly than he could. The widow Jenkins from town might be willing to come by occasionally to teach Charlotte womanly skills that Beau couldn't. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was better than sending his daughter halfway across the country. As Beau saddled Thunder for the ride into town, Charlotte emerged from the cabin, clutching her mother's old tin box of sewing supplies. "Can I come with you to town, Papa?" she asked, her blue eyes hopeful. Beau hesitated. Town meant exposure to the rougher elements: drunken cowboys, traveling salesmen with loose morals, and the constant reminder that their little family was incomplete in a world that expected certain conventions. "Please," Charlotte added. "I promise to stay close." "All right," Beau relented, "but you're to stay within eyesight at all times." The ride to Silverdale took nearly an hour, with Charlotte seated in front of Beau on Thunder's back. As they approached the dusty main street, the usual Saturday bustle was in full swing. Farmers and ranchers had come to town for supplies, cowboys on their day off loitered outside the saloon, and women in their best dresses walked arm in arm between the general store and the millinery. Beau tethered Thunder outside the general store. "Let's see about finding Mrs. Jenkins first," he told Charlotte, taking her hand as they navigated the boardwalk. They hadn't gone far when a commotion erupted from the direction of the stagecoach depot. A woman's voice rose above the general din, clear and authoritative. "I assure you, sir, my belongings are quite intact, and I'll thank you not to manhandle them further." Beau turned, curiosity getting the better of him. A tall woman stood beside the stagecoach, hands planted firmly on her hips as she confronted the driver. Her emerald traveling dress, though dusty from the journey, spoke of Eastern refinement, as did her precisely pinned chestnut hair beneath a modest hat. "That driver's always rough with the luggage," Beau muttered to Charlotte. "Come along now." But Charlotte remained rooted to the spot, watching the scene unfold with undisguised interest. The woman was now directing two young men from the livery to handle her trunks with more care, gesturing with elegant hands that bore no wedding ring. "She's pretty," Charlotte whispered, tugging at Beau's sleeve. "I suppose," Beau answered noncommittally, though he'd noticed. It would be hard not to notice such a woman in Silverdale, where female beauty typically came weathered by hard living or obscured by the practical concerns of frontier life. "Wonder who she is," Charlotte continued. "Do you think she's staying?" "Not our concern," Beau replied, gently pulling Charlotte toward Mrs. Jenkins's small house at the edge of town. "We've got business to attend to." Mrs. Jenkins, a stout widow of 60 with perpetually flour-dusted hands, listened to Beau's proposition with a skeptical expression. "I'd be happy to teach the girl what I know, Beau," she said finally, "but my rheumatism's acting up something fierce these days. Can't make the ride out to your place regular-like." Disappointment settled in Beau's chest. "I understand, madam. Why don't you bring her to town once a week, Mrs. Jenkins suggested. "She could spend the day with me while you tend to your business." It wasn't ideal, but Beau nodded his agreement. "That would be most appreciated." With that arrangement settled, Beau and Charlotte headed to the general store. While Beau discussed a feed order with Mr. Peterson, the proprietor, Charlotte wandered to the fabric section, where she fingered calicos and ginghams with wistful longing. "That blue would suit you beautifully," came a melodious voice from behind her. Charlotte turned to find the woman from the stagecoach depot standing there, a gentle smile on her face. Up close, Charlotte could see that she was younger than she'd first appeared, perhaps in her mid-20s, with clear hazel eyes and a sprinkling of freckles across her nose that lent a charming imperfection to her otherwise refined appearance. "My mama had a dress in that color," Charlotte replied, suddenly shy. "Had," the woman queried softly. "She died 3 winters ago." The woman's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "I'm very sorry to hear that." She extended her hand. "I'm Miss Hannah Fairchild. I've just arrived from Boston." "I'm Charlotte Quincy," the girl replied, taking the offered hand. "Are you visiting someone in Silverdale?" "Actually, I'm the new schoolteacher," Hannah explained. "The town council wrote that there were enough children now to warrant a proper school." Charlotte's eyes widened. "A real school, with books and a bell and everything," Hannah laughed, a warm sound that drew Beau's attention from across the store. "Yes, indeed, though we'll have to see about the bell. Do you like to learn, Charlotte?" "Oh, yes. Papa teaches me my letters and sums when he can, but he's awful busy with the ranch most days." Beau approached then, his expression guarded as he took in the elegant stranger conversing with his daughter. "Papa, this is Miss Fairchild," Charlotte announced excitedly. "She's going to be our new school teacher." Beau touched the brim of his hat in polite greeting. "Beau Quincy, madam, welcome to Silverdale." "Thank you, Mr. Quincy," Hannah replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "Your daughter has been telling me about her love of learning. I hope to see her when school begins next month." A complicated mix of emotions crossed Beau's face. A school would provide Charlotte with the education she deserved, but it also meant changes to their carefully constructed routine. "We live a fair piece out of town," he said, hesitation evident in his tone. "Several children will be coming in from outlying ranches," Hannah explained. The council mentioned arranging boarding for those too far to travel daily. The thought of Charlotte staying in town without him sent a spike of anxiety through Beau's chest. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, I reckon. Charlotte, time we were heading back." "It was lovely meeting you both," Hannah said, her smile lingering on Charlotte's disappointed face. As they rode home, Charlotte chattered incessantly about Miss Fairchild and the prospect of attending a real school. Beau listened with half an ear, his thoughts tangled in considerations of practical logistics and deeper concerns about the changes this development might bring to their lives. The following weeks brought unexpected encounters with Hannah Fairchild. She seemed to materialize wherever Beau and Charlotte went in town: the church social, the general store, even the livery where Beau occasionally helped the blacksmith with particularly difficult horses. Each time, Hannah engaged Charlotte in conversation about books or nature, or some simple observation that left the girl glowing with attention. Beau maintained a polite distance, though he couldn't help noticing the way Hannah's eyes crinkled when she laughed, or how she listened to Charlotte with genuine interest, rather than the condescending patience many adults showed children. Despite his wariness, he found himself watching for her whenever they came to town. One Saturday in late July, disaster struck. While Beau was securing a load of lumber to their wagon, Charlotte wandered toward the creek that ran behind the general store, fascinated by a family of ducks paddling in the shallows. She ventured too close to the slippery bank, and before Beau could shout a warning, she tumbled into the water with a splash and a startled cry. The creek wasn't deep, but the recent rains had strengthened its current. Charlotte flailed, panic overriding her limited swimming abilities as the water pulled her downstream. Beau sprinted along the bank, heart pounding with terror, but Hannah Fairchild, who had been gathering specimens for a science lesson nearby, acted faster. Without hesitation, Hannah plunged into the creek, her skirts billowing around her as she fought the current to reach Charlotte. She caught the girl around the waist and struggled toward the bank, where Beau's strong hands pulled them both to safety. Charlotte coughed and sputtered, more frightened than hurt, while Hannah sat shivering on the grass, her elegant attire ruined and her carefully pinned hair coming loose in wet tangles around her shoulders. "Are you all right?" Beau demanded of Charlotte, checking her for injuries with trembling hands. Charlotte nodded, then turned to Hannah. "You saved me," she said with childish directness. "Anyone would have done the same," Hannah replied, wringing water from her sleeve. "But you're the one who did," Beau said quietly, meeting her eyes with newfound respect. "Thank you, Miss Fairchild. I'm in your debt." "No debt necessary, Mr. Quincy, though I fear my teaching wardrobe has suffered a considerable setback." Hannah attempted a light tone, but her teeth chattered with cold. "We need to get you both dry," Beau said decisively. "Our wagon's right there. I've got blankets in the back." Wrapped in rough woolen blankets, Charlotte and Hannah huddled in the wagon as Beau drove them to the hotel where Hannah had taken a room until more permanent accommodations could be arranged. The hotel proprietor's wife, Mrs. Sullivan, took one look at Hannah's bedraggled state and whisked her away, promising hot water and dry clothes. "We'll wait to make sure you're truly all right," Beau called after them, settling onto a chair in the small lobby with Charlotte at his side. When Hannah reappeared half an hour later in a simple blue dress with her damp hair braided and pinned up, Beau felt an unexpected tightening in his chest. Without the formal trappings of her usual attire, she looked younger and somehow more approachable. "You didn't have to wait," Hannah said, though her smile suggested she was pleased they had. "Least we could do," Beau replied gruffly. "Charlotte wants to thank you properly." Charlotte stepped forward, pressing a small object into Hannah's hand, a crudely fashioned but earnestly crafted leather bracelet. "I made it," she explained, "like Mama used to make." Hannah's fingers closed around the gift, her expression softening. "It's beautiful, Charlotte. I'll treasure it." An awkward silence fell, broken when Mrs. Sullivan bustled over with an announcement. "Miss Fairchild, Reverend Wilson stopped by. Says the school roof is leaking something awful after yesterday's storm. He's calling for volunteers to help with repairs before your furniture arrives." Beau cleared his throat, I'll help, got a load of lumber in the wagon that'll do for patches. Mr. Quincy, that's very generous, but consider it payment for fishing my daughter out of the creek, Beau interrupted. Besides, I've got experience with roofs. My own leaks regular every spring. And so Beau found himself spending the afternoon alongside 4 other men, repairing the schoolhouse roof, while Charlotte and Hannah sorted through a donation of books that had arrived from a church in Denver. By the time the work was done, the sun was lowering, casting long shadows across Silverdale's dusty streets. It's too late to head back to the ranch tonight, Beau decided, eyeing the darkening sky. We'll get a room at the hotel and leave at first light. Over Charlotte's protests that she wasn't tired, they secured a room and then joined several townspeople gathering for the evening meal in the hotel's small dining room. Hannah sat alone at a corner table, making notes in a small book. May we join you? Charlotte asked, already pulling out a chair. Charlotte, Beau admonished, Miss Fairchild might prefer her privacy. Not at all, Hannah assured them, closing her book. I'd welcome the company. The conversation flowed more easily than Beau had expected, particularly once Charlotte began peppering Hannah with questions about Boston school and whether they would learn about exotic animals in their lessons. Hannah answered each query with patience and often humor, drawing even Beau into the discussion. And what brought you to Wyoming Territory, Miss Fairchild? Beau asked during a lull. Boston to Silverdale is quite a change. Hannah's expression grew contemplative. Several things, I suppose. My father passed away last year, and the family home felt oppressive with just my stepmother and me. I've always wanted to teach, but Boston has no shortage of qualified teachers. When I saw the advertisement for this position, it seemed like an opportunity for a fresh start. You left everything familiar behind, Beau observed. That takes courage. Or desperation, Hannah replied with a self-deprecating smile. Perhaps a bit of both. Papa says Mama was the bravest person he knew because she came west with him when everyone told her not to, Charlotte contributed. A shadow crossed Beau's face at the mention of his late wife. Mary had pioneer spirit, that's certain. She sounds remarkable, Hannah said gently. She was, Beau confirmed, then stood abruptly. It's getting late, Charlotte, time for bed. As they bid Hannah good night, Charlotte lingered, her small hand resting on Hannah's arm. Will you tell me a story sometime? Papa tries, but he says he's not good at the voices like Mama was. Charlotte, Beau warned, embarrassment coloring his tone. I'd be delighted to tell you stories, Hannah replied, her eyes meeting Beau's over Charlotte's head. Any time. That night, as Charlotte slept soundly in the hotel room's narrow bed, Beau sat by the window, watching the moon rise over the distant mountains. Hannah Fairchild had stirred something in him, not just attraction, though he couldn't deny that existed, but a reminder of possibilities he'd long since abandoned. The idea that life could contain more than mere survival, that joy might again have a place in their world, it was a dangerous notion. Loss had taught Beau the precariousness of happiness, how quickly it could be snatched away. Allowing Hannah into their lives meant risking that pain again, not just for himself but for Charlotte, who had already lost too much. Yet as he watched his daughter's peaceful slumber, Beau wondered if his protectiveness was becoming a cage rather than a shield. Charlotte needed more than he alone could provide. She needed connection, education, and yes, perhaps a woman's guidance. The question that haunted him as dawn approached was whether he was brave enough to open their carefully constructed world to someone new. The weeks that followed brought a steadier rhythm to their encounters with Hannah. Each Saturday when they came to town, Charlotte would insist on visiting the schoolhouse where Hannah was often preparing for the coming term. Sometimes they'd bring fresh vegetables from their garden or a brace of rabbits Beau had trapped. Hannah always accepted these offerings with genuine gratitude, and in return, she would loan Charlotte books or show her the progress on the school's organization. Beau found reasons to linger during these visits, a loose hinge that needed fixing, shelves that required mounting, a stubborn window that wouldn't open properly. Hannah never questioned these self-assigned tasks, but sometimes Beau would catch her watching him with a thoughtful expression that made his collar feel suddenly tight. August arrived with scorching heat that baked the Wyoming earth, and sent dust devils spinning across the plains. The creek where Charlotte had fallen dwindled to a mere trickle, and ranchers began to worry about their stock's water supply. Beau spent long days ensuring their small herd had access to the spring-fed pond on the north end of his property, often returning home after Charlotte was asleep. One particularly brutal afternoon, as Beau worked to reinforce the windmill that pumped water to their cabin, a rider appeared on the horizon. Shading his eyes against the relentless sun, Beau was surprised to recognize Hannah atop a dappled mare, approaching at a steady trot. "Miss Fairchild," he called as she neared, setting down his tools and wiping sweat from his brow. "This is unexpected." Hannah dismounted gracefully, leading her horse toward the water trough. "I hope I'm not intruding, Mr. Quincy. I've been delivering school notices to the outlying ranches, and yours was next on my list. Charlotte will be sorry she missed you. She's spending the day with Mrs. Jenkins in town." "Actually, I was hoping to speak with you," Hannah admitted, pulling a folded paper from her saddlebag. "The school term begins in 2 weeks, and as you know, Charlotte's ranch is among the furthest from town." Beau nodded, his jaw tightening slightly. The conversation he'd been avoiding had finally arrived. "Several families have arranged boarding situations in town for their children," Hannah continued. "The Millers have offered to take 2 girls, and Mrs. Sullivan at the hotel has a spare room she's willing to let at a reduced rate for a student." "I see," Beau said, his voice carefully neutral. "And you're suggesting Charlotte should stay in town during the school week?" Hannah met his gaze directly. "It would be the most practical solution, Mr. Quincy. The alternative would be a very long daily ride for a young girl." Beau turned away, focusing on the windmill's mechanism rather than Hannah's earnest expression. "Charlotte's never spent a night away from home except when we're both in town." "I understand your concern," Hannah said softly. "Truly I do, but education requires certain sacrifices." "Sacrifices," Beau echoed. "I've sacrificed plenty already, Miss Fairchild, my wife. Years of watching my daughter grow while I work the land. Now you're asking me to give up her daily presence as well." Hannah was quiet for a moment, then approached to stand beside him. "What does Charlotte want?" The question caught Beau off guard. "She wants to attend school. She's made that clear enough." "Have you discussed the boarding arrangements with her?" Beau shook his head. "Didn't see the point in raising possibilities that might not come to pass." "Perhaps you should," Hannah suggested gently. "She's young, but she has opinions worth considering." Beau straightened, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. Hannah's cheeks were flushed from the heat, and a few tendrils of hair had escaped her bonnet, curling against her neck. For a wild moment, he wanted to brush them back to feel if they were as soft as they appeared. "I'll think on it," he said finally, taking a step backward. "Would you care for some water before you continue your rounds? It's a scorcher today." Hannah accepted the offer, and they moved to the shade of the cabin's porch. Beau brought 2 tin cups of water from the kitchen pump, condensation beating on the metal in the heat. "You have a beautiful place here," Hannah observed, looking out over the rolling grassland that surrounded the ranch. "It must have taken years of work. Mary and I came here right after we married in '64, Beau explained. "Nothing but open range then. Built the cabin that first summer, added the barn a year later." He paused, memories rising unbidden. "Mary planted those cottonwoods by the creek. Said a home needed growing things around it." Hannah smiled. She was right. There's something hopeful about trees in this landscape. "Hope was Mary's specialty," Beau said, his voice roughening. "Always looking forward, making plans." "Even when the drought came in '69 and we nearly lost everything, she kept talking about next year and how things would improve." "And did they? For a time. We had good years. Charlotte was born in '71. Mary painted those wildflowers on the kitchen cupboards while she was waiting." Beau gestured toward the cabin. "Never got around to finishing them after Charlotte arrived, always meant to find the time." "What happened to her?" Hannah asked quietly. "If you don't mind my asking." Beau took a long drink of water before answering. "Winter of '73 was brutal. Blizzard came through faster than anyone expected. Mary was in town picking up supplies when it hit. She tried to make it back." His voice faltered. "Found her horse first, then tracked her for almost a mile. She'd gotten disoriented in the whiteout, wandered off the trail." By the time I reached her, the cold had already taken hold. Hannah's hand moved unconsciously to cover his where it rested on the porch railing. "I'm so sorry, Beau." It was the first time she'd used his given name, and something in the simple intimacy of it broke through the careful wall he'd maintained. Hardest part was coming home to Charlotte, telling her mama wasn't coming back. "You've done remarkably well with her," Hannah said. "She's bright, kind, curious, everything a child should be." "Done my best," Beau acknowledged. "But there are things I can't give her, woman things." Mary had plans for teaching her sewing and cooking and whatever else girls need to know. Charlotte seems to be finding her way with those skills. Out of necessity, not proper teaching. That bracelet she gave you, spent weeks figuring it out on her own from watching her mother years ago. Hannah touched the leather band she wore on her wrist, which makes it all the more precious. They fell silent, watching heat shimmer over the distant hills. Beau was acutely aware of Hannah's presence beside him, the faint lavender scent that somehow persisted despite the dust and heat. The way she absently traced the rim of her water cup with one slender finger, the gentle rise and fall of her breath. "I should continue my rounds," Hannah said eventually, handing him the empty cup. "Thank you for the water." Beau walked with her to her horse, holding the mare steady as Hannah mounted. "About Charlotte's schooling," he said, looking up at her. "I'll talk to her tonight." Hannah nodded. "Whatever you decide, Mr. Quincy, please know that Charlotte's welfare is my primary concern." "I believe that," Beau replied, surprising himself with the realization that he truly did. As Hannah rode away, Beau stood watching until she disappeared over the ridge. Something had shifted between them today, a softening of boundaries, an acknowledgement of mutual respect. He wasn't ready to name the warmth that spread through his chest at the thought of her, but he could no longer deny its existence. That evening, when Charlotte returned from her day with Mrs. Jenkins, bubbling with stories about the new dress she'd helped sew and the apple pie they'd baked, Beau broached the subject of her schooling arrangements. "Miss Fairchild stopped by today," he began, setting a plate of beans and cornbread before her. Charlotte's eyes lit up. "She came here. To our ranch, delivering notices about school starting. Says you'll need to board in town during the week since we're so far out." Charlotte's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Stay in town without you. That's the idea. You'd come home Fridays after school, go back Monday mornings." "Where would I sleep? Who would I stay with?" Uncertainty crept into Charlotte's voice. Beau explained the options Hannah had outlined. Charlotte listened with uncharacteristic solemnity, pushing beans around her plate. "What do you think about it?" Beau asked finally. Charlotte looked up, her blue eyes so like Mary's wide with conflicted emotions. "I want to go to school real bad," she admitted, "but I don't want to leave you alone all week." A lump formed in Beau's throat at his daughter's concern for him rather than herself. "I'd manage fine," he assured her. "Question is whether you'd be all right staying with strangers." Charlotte considered this. "Would Miss Fairchild check on me sometimes? I expect she'd see you every day at school, but after school, I mean, like at night." Beau hadn't considered this aspect. "I could ask her, I suppose." Charlotte nodded decisively. "If Miss Fairchild checks on me, I think I could stay with the Millers. Their Emma is nice, even if she's younger than me." "I'll speak to Miss Fairchild about it Saturday when we go to town," Beau promised, marveling at his daughter's resilience. Later, after Charlotte had gone to bed, Beau sat on the porch steps, his thoughts circling like hawks. Sending Charlotte to town meant restructuring their entire existence. The ranch would be quieter, emptier without her daily presence. Yet the alternative, denying her an education, wasn't truly an option. Mary would never have forgiven him for that. By the time dawn broke over the eastern ridge, Beau had reached a decision. He would support Charlotte's schooling, whatever arrangements that required, but he would also ensure she never felt abandoned in the process. Mary's absence had left a void in their lives. Beau was determined that his periodic absence wouldn't compound that loss. Saturday arrived with a crack of thunder that heralded an unexpected late summer storm. Beau and Charlotte made the journey to town beneath a leaden sky that occasionally split open to drench them before relenting into sullen drizzle. By the time they reached Silverdale, both were thoroughly soaked and mud splattered. "Head over to the hotel and get warm by their fire," Beau instructed Charlotte as they tied Thunder to the hitching post outside the general store. "I'll see to our supplies and meet you there." "Can't I go see Miss Fairchild first?" Charlotte pleaded. "I want to tell her I can stay with the Millers for school." Beau hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but go straight to the schoolhouse and straight to the hotel after. No wandering in this weather." Charlotte darted off down the muddy street, carefully picking her way around the deepest puddles. Beau watched her go, a familiar mixture of pride and apprehension tightening his chest. Each small independence, she claimed, was both victory and reminder that she was growing beyond his complete protection. Inside the general store, Beau found a crowd of ranchers and townspeople taking shelter from the downpour. Mr. Peterson was doing brisk business in rubber boots and oilcloths, while his wife distributed cups of hot coffee to the rain-soaked customers. "Brutal day to be out, Quincy," called Harry Donovan, a neighboring rancher whose property bordered Beau's to the west. "Your creek holding up?" "Rising fast," Beau confirmed, accepting a cup of coffee from Mrs. Peterson with a grateful nod. "Moved the cattle to higher ground yesterday. Smart move. Jenkins Creek's already over its banks south of town. Road to Laramie might wash out if this keeps up." Beau frowned. "Charlotte and I were planning to head back this afternoon. Might want to reconsider," Donovan advised. "Weatherman at the telegraph office says this is just the beginning, storm system stretching all the way to the Dakota Territory." A cold knot of worry formed in Beau's stomach. They'd packed only for a day trip, not an extended stay. More concerning was the ranch livestock needed tending, and the roof of the chicken coop had been showing signs of weakness. If the storm was as bad as predicted, he'd likely return to considerable damage. "Obliged for the warning," Beau said, downing his coffee and collecting his supplies with increased urgency. He needed to find Charlotte and make decisions quickly about whether to risk the journey home or secure accommodations in town. Outside, the rain had intensified, turning Silverdale's main street into a muddy river. Beau pulled his hat lower and set off toward the schoolhouse, his boots sinking ankle-deep with each step. The schoolhouse windows glowed with warm lamplight against the gloomy afternoon. Beau stomped mud from his boots on the small covered porch before pushing open the door. Inside, he found Hannah at her desk, surrounded by stacks of books and papers. Charlotte sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, apparently sorting pencils into a wooden box. "Papa!" Charlotte exclaimed, jumping up. "Miss Fairchild says I can help her set up the school supply cupboards today." "That's fine, Charlotte, but we need to talk about our plans," Beau said, removing his dripping hat. "Storm's getting worse." Hannah rose from her desk, concern etched on her features. "Mr. Peterson sent word that the creek crossings might become dangerous. Are you considering staying in town overnight?" "Seems the prudent choice," Beau admitted. "Though the hotel's likely full with folks stranded by the weather." "The Millers might have space," Hannah suggested. Or she hesitated briefly. "I have a spare room in my new cottage. The school board arranged it for me. It's small, but Charlotte would be comfortable there." The offer took Beau by surprise. "That's very kind, Miss Fairchild, but we couldn't impose. It's hardly an imposition. Charlotte could help me prepare for the school opening, and I'd feel better knowing you weren't attempting a dangerous crossing." "Please, Papa," Charlotte pleaded, her eyes bright with excitement. "I could see Miss Fairchild's house and help with the school." Beau looked between his eager daughter and Hannah's earnest expression. Common sense argued for accepting the offer. The alternative might be sleeping in the livery stable if all rooms were taken. Yet something about entering Hannah's personal space, becoming temporarily part of her household, felt like crossing a boundary that couldn't easily be re-established. "If you're certain it's no trouble," he said finally. "None whatsoever," Hannah assured him. "In fact, I'd welcome the company. The cottage can be quite quiet in the evenings." Arrangements settled, Beau left to check on Thunder and secure additional supplies for their extended stay. By the time he returned to the schoolhouse, the rain had become a steady, pounding deluge that drummed against the roof and streamed from the eaves in silvery curtains. "We'll make a run for it," Hannah announced, buttoning her coat and handing Charlotte a spare shawl to cover her head. "The cottage is just behind the church, not far." The three of them dashed through the downpour, splashing through puddles that had become small ponds. Charlotte shrieked with a combination of dismay and delight as mud spattered her dress, while Hannah laughed, her usual composure temporarily abandoned in the face of nature's onslaught. Hannah's cottage proved to be a snug, whitewashed structure with blue shutters and a small front garden that was currently transforming into a miniature lake. Inside, however, was dry and welcoming, with simple but tasteful furnishings and the unmistakable scent of fresh baked bread. "I wasn't expecting guests," Hannah apologized, lighting additional lamps as darkness fell prematurely due to the storm. "But I always bake on Saturdays." "It smells wonderful," Charlotte declared, shedding her wet outer layers. Beau stood awkwardly just inside the door, suddenly acutely aware that he was dripping onto Hannah's clean floor and that this was the first time he'd been inside a single woman's home since before his marriage. "Perhaps I should see if the livery has space after all," he suggested. "Charlotte could stay here with you." Hannah turned from where she was stirring something fragrant on the stove. "Don't be ridiculous, Mr. Quincy. The spare room has 2 beds. It was meant for boarders before I arrived. You'll both be perfectly comfortable, and I won't have you sleeping with the horses when there's dry space here." Her practical tone brooked no argument, and Beau found himself relenting. "At least let me pay you for the trouble." "The only payment I require is help carrying firewood in from the back porch," Hannah replied with a smile. "The storm has turned the evening quite chilly." As Hannah and Charlotte prepared supper, Beau tended to the practical matters of building up the fire and bringing in additional wood and water. The domesticity of the scene struck him with unexpected force, the warm kitchen filled with savory aromas, Charlotte's laughter as Hannah showed her how to knead dough for the next day's bread, the soft glow of lamplight reflecting off copper pots hanging from hooks near the stove. It reminded him painfully of evenings long past, when Mary would sing as she cooked, and he would whittle toys for the child they both knew was coming. Yet the pain was tempered by something else, a cautious appreciation for the present moment, for the simple comfort of shared human connection. Supper was a simple but satisfying affair of bean soup, fresh bread, and preserved peaches Hannah had brought from Boston. Charlotte dominated the conversation, peppering Hannah with questions about what they'd learn in school and whether there would be Christmas pageants like the ones Mrs. Jenkins had described from her childhood in Pennsylvania. "I thought we might perform scenes from A Christmas Carol," Hannah replied. "With costumes and sets the older children could design. Could I be in it?" Charlotte asked eagerly. "Every child who wishes to participate will have a role," Hannah assured her, "though we have many months before we need to worry about Christmas festivities." As the evening progressed, the storm intensified, wind howling around the cottage's eaves and rain lashing against the windows with renewed fury. Charlotte's excitement gradually gave way to tiredness, her eyelids drooping despite her best efforts to remain engaged in the conversation. "I believe someone is ready for bed," Hannah observed gently. Charlotte protested weakly, but allowed herself to be led to the spare room, where Hannah had already laid out towels and a nightgown that had belonged to her younger sister. "It might be a bit large," she told Charlotte, "but it will be more comfortable than sleeping in damp clothes." Once Charlotte was settled, Beau found himself alone with Hannah in the cottage's small sitting room. The awkwardness he'd felt earlier returned tenfold. In the warm lamplight, with the storm creating a cocoon of isolation around the cottage, the room seemed to shrink, bringing Hannah's presence into sharp relief. "More coffee," Hannah offered, gesturing to the pot keeping warm on the hearth. "Thank you," Beau accepted, more for something to occupy his hands than from actual thirst. Hannah poured 2 cups, then settled into a chair across from him. "Charlotte is a remarkable child," she said. "You've done well with her." "Done my best," Beau replied, the familiar phrase coming automatically, "though there are gaps I can't seem to fill." "All parents face that challenge, I imagine," Hannah said thoughtfully, "even in traditional families. My own father was present but distant, more concerned with his banking business than with understanding his daughters." Beau raised an eyebrow. "Daughters? You have sisters?" "2," Hannah confirmed. both married now with families of their own in Boston. I'm the odd one who chose teaching over matrimony. No suitors back east, the question escaped before Beau could consider its propriety. Hannah smiled slightly. Several, none who understood that I wanted more from life than managing a household and attending tea parties. Teaching children in Wyoming Territory is certainly more, Beau observed. It is, Hannah agreed. Though my stepmother considers it tantamount to social suicide, her parting words were to remind me that spinster school teachers are objects of pity, not admiration. Sounds like a charming woman, Beau said dryly. Hannah laughed. Gertrude has her virtues, though warmth isn't among them. She married my father when I was 12 after my mother died of influenza. I believe she genuinely thought she was fulfilling her duty by attempting to shape me into a proper Boston society woman. Some people can't be shaped against their nature, Beau said. Mary was like that. Her family wanted her to marry a business associate's son, settle in St. Louis. She scandalized them all by running off with a dirt-poor rancher headed for Wyoming instead. She sounds like someone I would have admired, Hannah said softly. You'd have gotten along famously, Beau agreed, surprised by how easily he could imagine it. Both headstrong, both believers in education. Mary taught at a small school in Missouri before we married, always said she'd go back to it once Charlotte was older. Thunder crashed directly overhead, making both of them jump. The lamps flickered, casting momentary shadows across Hannah's face. In that brief illumination, Beau saw something in her expression of vulnerability beneath the composed exterior she typically presented. "May I ask you something, Mr. Quincy?" Hannah said after a moment. "Seems only fair you call me Beau, given the circumstances," he replied. Hannah nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "Beau, then, I've been wondering, why did you react so strongly to the suggestion that Charlotte board in town for school? Many children here do the same." Beau stared into his coffee cup, considering his answer. "Partly practical concerns. Charlotte's never been away from home for extended periods. Partly selfish ones. The ranch gets mighty quiet with just me." He paused. "But mostly, I think, fear. Fear of what? That she'll need me less. That she'll grow away from me toward town life and new influences." Beau looked up, meeting Hannah's gaze directly. "That I'm failing Mary by not being enough for our daughter." Hannah was quiet for a long moment. "I don't believe we're meant to be enough for those we love," she said finally. "Not completely. Even couples who are deeply connected need friendships, community, purpose beyond each other. Children need diverse influences to become their full selves." "You sound like Mary," Beau said. "She used to say people were like gardens, needed different kinds of nourishment to grow properly." "A wise analogy," Hannah approved. "Charlotte clearly flourishes under your care, Beau. Allowing her to experience broader horizons doesn't diminish your importance in her life." The sincerity in Hannah's voice pierced something within Beau, a knot of tension he'd carried so long he'd ceased to notice its weight. "I'm trying to see it that way," he admitted. "It's just been the two of us for so long now. Change is rarely comfortable," Hannah acknowledged. "Even necessary change." Another crash of thunder punctuated her words, followed by the sound of pattering feet. Charlotte appeared in the doorway, her borrowed nightgown hanging past her knees, her expression anxious. "The storm's awful loud," she said, twisting the fabric between her fingers. "Storms often sound worse than they are," Hannah reassured her, rising to guide Charlotte to a seat near the fire. "When I was a girl in Boston, I used to imagine the thunder was giants bowling in the clouds." Charlotte's eyes widened. "Giants." "Enormous ones," Hannah confirmed with exaggerated solemnity. "Very poor bowlers, too, always dropping their balls and causing that terrible rumbling." A reluctant smile tugged at Charlotte's lips. "Papa says it's just the air getting hot and cold at the same time." "That's the scientific explanation," Hannah agreed. "But sometimes stories make frightening things easier to bear." "Mama used to tell me stories during storms," Charlotte said softly, "about a brave princess who wasn't afraid of anything." Hannah glanced at Beau, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Would you like to hear a story now?" she asked Charlotte. Charlotte nodded, curling her feet beneath her on the chair. "Yes, please." As Hannah began a tale about a clever girl who outwitted a storm spirit, Beau watched his daughter's face. The anxiety gradually melted away, replaced by rapt attention and occasional laughter. Hannah's storytelling had a natural rhythm to it, her voice rising and falling with the drama of the narrative, her hands occasionally illustrating key points with graceful gestures. More striking to Beau was the genuine enjoyment Hannah herself seemed to take in the activity. This wasn't mere placating of a frightened child, but shared pleasure in the act of storytelling. When Charlotte interjected questions or observations, Hannah incorporated them seamlessly into the tale, making the girl an active participant rather than passive listener. By the time the story concluded, with the clever girl having not only calmed the storm spirit but befriended it for future assistance, Charlotte's eyelids were drooping again. "I believe the storm has lessened somewhat," Hannah observed, though the rain still pattered steadily against the windows. "Perhaps you can sleep now," Charlotte nodded sleepily. "That was a good story, almost as good as Mama's." Beau tensed slightly at the comparison, but Hannah merely smiled. "I'm honored you think so. Your mother's stories must have been very special indeed." "They were," Charlotte confirmed, rising and taking Hannah's hand naturally. "Will you tell me another tomorrow? If the storm keeps us here, certainly," Hannah promised. "Now back to bed with you." As Hannah led Charlotte back to the spare room, Beau remained by the fire, emotions churning beneath his outwardly calm demeanor. Watching Hannah with his daughter had awakened conflicting responses: gratitude for her kindness, wariness of Charlotte's growing attachment to her, and something deeper and more troubling. A longing for what this evening hinted at, a life less solitary and stark than the one he and Charlotte had carved out since Mary's death. Hannah returned a few minutes later. "She fell asleep almost immediately," she reported. "The excitement of the day caught up with her, I think." "Thank you for the story," Beau said. "She's missed the bedtime tales, the woman's touch, things I can't give her no matter how I try." "You give her security, love, stability," Hannah countered. "Those are precious gifts, Beau. Not enough, though. As you said earlier, no single person can be everything another needs." Beau rose, suddenly restless. "I should turn in as well. Dawn comes early, storm or no storm." Hannah nodded, collecting their empty cups. "Of course. There are extra blankets in the chest at the foot of the bed if you need them." As Beau moved toward the spare room, he paused at the doorway. "Hannah," he said, using her given name for the first time, "thank you. Not just for the shelter tonight, but for everything you've done for Charlotte since arriving in Silverdale." Hannah's expression softened in the lamplight. "It's been my pleasure, truly. She's a special child." "Good night, then." "Good night, Beau." In the spare room, Charlotte slept peacefully, her breathing deep and even. Beau settled onto the narrow second bed, listening to the storm's gradual weakening and the occasional creak of footsteps as Hannah moved about the cottage, extinguishing lamps and banking the fire for the night. The events of the day, from their rain-soaked journey to town to this unexpected domestic interlude, had shifted something fundamental between them. Whether that shift would lead to further changes or revert to their previous careful distance remained to be seen. For now, in the quiet darkness, with Charlotte's steady breathing as counterpoint to the diminishing rain, Beau allowed himself to acknowledge the truth he'd been avoiding. Hannah Fairchild had become important to them both, in ways that extended far beyond her role as Charlotte's future teacher. Morning arrived with weak sunshine filtering through lingering clouds. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind puddles, debris, and a fresh, washed quality to the air that spoke of new beginnings. Beau woke to the scent of coffee and frying bacon, disoriented momentarily by the unfamiliar surroundings. Charlotte's bed was empty, and the sound of childish laughter mingled with Hannah's voice drifted from the kitchen. By the time Beau had dressed and made himself presentable, he discovered Charlotte and Hannah engaged in the serious business of flipping pancakes. Charlotte stood on a wooden stool beside the stove, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration as she carefully maneuvered the spatula beneath a golden brown cake. "Perfect," Hannah praised as Charlotte successfully flipped the pancake. "You have a natural talent for this." "Mama used to let me help with pancakes on Sundays," Charlotte said, beaming with pride. "But I was littler then, couldn't do it all by myself like now." "Good morning," Beau said, announcing his presence from the doorway. "Papa, I'm making breakfast," Charlotte exclaimed. "Miss Fairchild is teaching me how to tell when the bubbles are just right for flipping." "I see that," Beau replied, moving to pour himself coffee from the pot keeping warm on the back of the stove. "Quite the professional cook you're becoming." "Charlotte has been a tremendous help," Hannah said, setting plates on the small kitchen table. Her hair was loosely braided over one shoulder, less formally arranged than Beau had ever seen it, and she wore a simple blue calico dress with a crisp white apron. The domesticity of the scene struck him again with unexpected force. Breakfast passed with discussion of the storm's aftermath and plans for the day. The road to the Quincy ranch would be passable, though muddy, and Beau was anxious to check on his livestock and property. "Perhaps you could return next weekend," Hannah suggested as they prepared to depart. "Charlotte could bring her school supplies and see where her desk will be in the classroom." "Can we, Papa?" Charlotte asked eagerly. Beau nodded, though a part of him recognized the danger in these increasing connections to town and to Hannah specifically. Each visit made it harder to maintain the emotional distance that had protected him since Mary's death. "Weather permitting," he qualified. As they said their goodbyes, Charlotte surprised both adults by throwing her arms around Hannah's waist in a fierce hug. "Thank you for the stories and the pancakes and everything," she said, her voice muffled against Hannah's apron. Hannah returned the embrace naturally, one hand stroking Charlotte's hair. "You're very welcome, dear. I'll see you soon." When Charlotte stepped back, Beau found himself extending his hand to Hannah. "We're obliged for your hospitality." Hannah took his offered hand, her grip firm despite her slender fingers. "It was my pleasure, truly. Safe journey home." The ride back to the ranch was slower than usual due to muddy conditions, but the sun continued to strengthen throughout the morning, promising to dry the worst of the standing water by afternoon. Charlotte chattered happily about the upcoming school term and Hannah's cottage, while Beau listened with half an ear, his thoughts divided between practical concerns about the ranch and more complex reflections on their evolving relationship with Silverdale's new schoolteacher. The ranch had weathered the storm with minimal damage a few fence posts down, the chicken coop's roof partially collapsed as expected, and the vegetable garden flattened by the heavy rain. Nothing that couldn't be repaired within a day or two of solid work. As August gave way to September, a new rhythm established itself in the Quincy household. Charlotte stayed with the Miller family in town during the school week, returning to the ranch each Friday afternoon when Beau came to collect her. The arrangement, while initially strange, proved workable. Charlotte thrived under Hannah's teaching, developing new interests in literature and natural science that she eagerly shared during her weekend visits home. More surprising to Beau was how frequently Hannah herself became part of their weekend routine. She often accompanied Charlotte to the edge of town on Fridays to greet Beau when he arrived, sometimes walking alongside them for a while as Charlotte recounted the week's highlights. On Sundays after church, it became customary for Hannah to join them for dinner at the hotel before Beau and Charlotte headed back to the ranch. These regular encounters allowed Beau to observe Hannah in various contexts: the professional teacher, the compassionate friend, the thoughtful conversationalist. Each facet revealed added depth to her character, challenging his initial impression of an Eastern lady unsuited to frontier life. Hannah adapted to Silverdale with surprising ease, winning over even the most skeptical townspeople with her genuine interest in their lives and her dedication to their children's education. By mid-October, when the aspen trees turned golden against the evergreen slopes of the distant mountains, Beau could no longer deny that his feelings for Hannah had developed beyond mere appreciation or friendship. The realization came not in a sudden epiphany, but as gradual acknowledgement of an established truth, like recognizing the changing of seasons after the shift was already well underway. The question that haunted Beau was whether any action should follow this recognition. Hannah had given no clear indication that she viewed him as anything more than Charlotte's father and a friendly acquaintance. Moreover, His status as a widowed rancher with limited prospects hardly seemed likely to appeal to an educated, refined woman who could presumably return east to a more comfortable life whenever she wished. These doubts preoccupied Beau as he rode into town one crisp Friday afternoon in late October. Charlotte had been fighting a mild cold all week, according to the note Hannah had sent with young Jimmy Watson, whose family ranched neighboring land. Beau had packed extra blankets for the ride home and planned to keep Charlotte indoors for most of the weekend to ensure her complete recovery. When he arrived at the schoolhouse, however, he found it empty save for Hannah, who was grading papers at her desk. She looked up at his entrance, her expression troubled. "Beau," she said, rising quickly. "I was about to send word to you. Charlotte's fever worsened this morning. Mrs. Miller thought it best not to move her, so she's resting at their home." Alarm shot through Beau. "How bad is it, doctor?" "Spencer visited at noon. He says it's influenza, nothing too serious if she rests properly, but he advised against traveling this weekend." Hannah gathered her shawl. "I'll take you to her." They walked quickly through town to the Millers' comfortable home near the church. Inside, they found Mrs. Miller, a kindly woman in her 50s, preparing a tray with tea and broth. "She's been sleeping most of the afternoon," Mrs. Miller reported. "Fever's still present but not dangerously high. Doctor left some powders to be mixed with water if the fever rises." Charlotte lay in a small bedroom at the back of the house, her cheeks flushed with fever, her breathing slightly labored. She stirred when Beau sat beside her on the bed, her eyes opening with effort. "Papa," she murmured, "did you come to take me home?" "Not today, Wildflower," Beau said, smoothing damp hair from her forehead. "Doctor says you need to rest here until you're stronger." Disappointment flickered across Charlotte's face. "But it's Friday. We always go home on Fridays." "We'll go home when you're better," Beau promised. "For now, you need to focus on getting well." Charlotte's gaze shifted to Hannah, who stood in the doorway. "Will you tell me a story like you did during the storm?" she asked, her voice raspy. "Of course," Hannah replied, moving to sit on the other side of the bed. "Which would you prefer, something adventurous or something soothing?" "Something with a happy ending," Charlotte requested, her eyelids already growing heavy again. As Hannah began a gentle tale about a forest creature finding its way home after a long journey, Beau watched his daughter's face relax into sleep. The tenderness in Hannah's voice, the way she instinctively adjusted the blankets around Charlotte's shoulders, struck him with painful clarity. Mary would have done exactly the same, the practical care combined with emotional nurturing that he'd never quite mastered despite his best efforts. When Charlotte was fully asleep, Hannah and Beau retreated to the Miller's kitchen, where Mrs. Miller insisted on providing them with coffee and fresh baked bread before discreetly withdrawing to give them privacy. "Dr. Spencer believes she'll recover quickly with proper rest," Hannah reassured Beau, seeing the worry etched on his features. "Children are remarkably resilient." "Mary died of influenza," Beau said quietly. "Started as just a cold, they said, turned bad so quickly." Understanding dawned in Hannah's eyes. "Charlotte's case is mild, Beau, and she has proper care here, a warm house, regular meals, medical attention." "I know," Beau acknowledged. "Still, I can't help but worry." "Of course you can't. You're her father." Hannah reached across the table to touch his hand briefly. "Will you stay in town until she's better?" Beau nodded. "Hotels should have rooms available now that the cattle drive season is ending." "You're welcome to use my spare room again," Hannah offered. "It would save you the expense and you'd be closer to Charlotte. The Miller's house is just across the churchyard from my cottage." The offer was practical, sensible even, yet Beau hesitated. Their night sheltering from the storm had been an emergency situation. This would be a deliberate choice to enter Hannah's home and life more intimately. "I wouldn't want to impose," he began. "It's not an imposition," Hannah interrupted firmly. "It's what neighbors do, help each other in times of need." Put that way, refusal seemed churlish. "Thank you," Beau said. "I'd be grateful for the accommodation." The next 3 days established a pattern. Beau spent mornings at the livery stable, helping with repairs to earn his keep, then afternoons at Charlotte's bedside. Hannah divided her time between school preparations and visiting Charlotte, often bringing small gifts, a new pencil, a ribbon for her hair, a particularly interesting rock she'd found on her walk home. Evenings at Hannah's cottage developed their own rhythm. Hannah would prepare a simple supper while Beau tended to the fire and other household tasks. Their conversation flowed more easily with each passing day, covering topics from childhood memories to philosophical questions about education and community. Hannah revealed a dry wit that surprised Beau, while he found himself sharing stories of his early ranching days that he'd almost forgotten. On the third night, as they sat before the fire with cups of tea, Hannah broached a subject that had clearly been on her mind. "Beau, may I ask you something potentially presumptuous?" He looked up, curiosity piqued by her serious tone. "Of course. I've noticed that Charlotte often speaks of her mother remembering shared activities, stories Mary told her, even specific phrases Mary used to say." Hannah paused. "Yet Charlotte was only 5 when Mary died. Are these truly her memories or stories you've kept alive for her?" The question caught Beau off guard. "Some of both, I suppose," he admitted after a moment's reflection. "Charlotte does remember Mary fragments mostly. Bedtime stories, baking together, songs Mary would sing. I've filled in gaps over the years, told stories about who her mother was, what she valued." "That's a tremendous gift you've given her," Hannah said softly. "Many men would have simply moved forward, allowing the past to fade." "Mary deserves to be remembered," Beau said simply. "She was extraordinarily brave enough to follow a dream to Wyoming, gentle enough to make our rough cabin a true home, strong enough to face frontier hardships without complaint." "You still love her very much," Hannah observed, her expression unreadable. "I'll always love Mary," Beau confirmed. "She gave me Charlotte, gave me the happiest years of my life." Hannah nodded, her gaze shifting to the fire. "As it should be, first loves shape us in ways nothing else can." Something in her tone made Beau study her more carefully. "You speak from experience." A wistful smile touched Hannah's lips. "Perhaps. There was someone once. A fellow teacher at the Girls' Academy in Boston. He had progressive ideas about education, about women's capabilities beyond domesticity." She traced the rim of her teacup with one finger. "We shared many conversations, many ideals. For a time, I thought we might share a future as well. What happened? His family had different expectations. He ultimately chose to honor their wishes rather than follow his heart." Hannah's expression remained composed, but Beau sensed the hurt beneath her matter-of-fact recounting. "It was for the best, truly. His ambitions lay in Boston educational circles, mine always pulled westward. Still, it couldn't have been easy," Beau said. "Life rarely offers easy paths to worthwhile destinations," Hannah replied with a small shrug. "Besides, had I married Arthur, I would never have come to Silverdale, never met Charlotte or you." The implication of her words hung in the air between them, creating a moment of heightened awareness that made Beau acutely conscious of the intimate setting the fire's warm glow, their relative isolation, the growing emotional connection that neither had openly acknowledged. Before Beau could formulate a response, a knock at the door shattered the moment. Mrs. Miller stood on the porch, her expression anxious. "Charlotte's fever has spiked," she reported. "She's asking for both of you." They hurried through the darkness to the Miller's house, guided by the lantern Mrs. Miller carried. Inside, they found Charlotte thrashing restlessly in her bed, her nightgown damp with sweat, her cheeks blazing with fever. "Papa," she whimpered when she saw him. "Everything hurts." "I'm here, Wildflower," Beau soothed, sitting beside her and taking her small hand in his. "Dr. Spencer's medicine will help you feel better soon." Mrs. Miller prepared the fever powders while Hannah dampened cloths to place on Charlotte's forehead and wrists. Together, they worked to make the child comfortable, speaking in gentle voices and moving with practiced efficiency. "Tell me about Mama," Charlotte requested as the medicine began to take effect, her voice small and vulnerable. "Was she ever sick like this?" Beau swallowed hard. "Sometimes." "Everyone gets sick occasionally, but your mama was strong just like you." "I wish she was here," Charlotte murmured, tears slipping from beneath her closed eyelids. "I miss her." "I know, Wildflower, I miss her too." Beau's voice cracked slightly. Hannah, who had been adjusting the cool cloth on Charlotte's forehead, spoke softly. "Your mother loves you very much, Charlotte. Love doesn't stop, even when people can't be with us anymore." But it's not the same, Charlotte protested weakly. I want someone to hold me like a mama does when I'm sick. Hannah met Beau's gaze over Charlotte's head, silent understanding passing between them. Then, with natural grace, Hannah moved to sit on the bed beside Charlotte, gathering the child gently into her arms. Like this. She asked, cradling Charlotte against her shoulder. Charlotte nodded, her tension visibly easing as she nestled against Hannah. Will you sing something? Mama used to sing when I couldn't sleep. Without hesitation, Hannah began a soft lullaby, her clear voice filling the small room with comforting melody. Beau watched, a complex mix of emotions tightening his throat, gratitude for Hannah's instinctive understanding of what Charlotte needed, sadness for Mary's absence, and something newer, more tender. The recognition of Hannah's place in their lives, not as Mary's replacement, but as her own irreplaceable presence. As Charlotte drifted into more peaceful sleep, Hannah continued to hold her, one hand stroking the child's tangled hair. She'll be cooler by morning, she whispered to Beau. The fever's breaking already. Thank you, Beau said, the words inadequate for the depth of his feeling. For everything. Hannah's smile held understanding beyond words. You should rest, she advised. I'll stay with her a while longer. I can take over, I know you can, Hannah interrupted gently. But you don't have to carry every burden alone, Beau. That's what, she paused, then continued more carefully. That's what friends are for. Beau recognized the hesitation, wondered at the word she might have originally intended. Neighbors, teachers, or something more significant. The question remained unspoken as he reluctantly withdrew to the Miller's parlor, where Mr. Miller had prepared a makeshift bed on the sofa. By morning, Charlotte's fever had indeed broken, leaving her weak but definitively on the mend. Dr. Spencer, making his morning rounds, pronounced her recovering well and suggested she could return to the ranch by Sunday if her improvement continued. The crisis passed. Life resumed its pattern with subtle but significant differences. Beau found reasons to extend his stay in town through Saturday, helping with repairs at the school and assisting Hannah with rearranging her classroom furniture. Their interactions carried new awareness, hands lingering momentarily when passing tools, gazes holding a beat longer than necessary, conversations that skirted the edges of deeper feelings without quite acknowledging them directly. Saturday evening found them once again before the fire in Hannah's cottage, Charlotte having insisted on returning there rather than staying another night at the Millers'. Though still pale, her spirit had rebounded with the resilience of childhood, and she'd spent the afternoon proudly showing Beau her school achievements. Now Charlotte slept soundly in the spare room while Beau and Hannah sat in companionable silence, each occupied with their own thoughts until Hannah spoke. I've been offered a position at a new academy in Denver, she said quietly. The school board president there wrote last week. They're seeking experienced teachers for a progressive curriculum. The announcement hit Beau with unexpected force like a physical blow. I see, he managed. When would you leave? I haven't accepted, Hannah clarified. They'd want me to start after the Christmas holiday, which would mean departing Silverdale in mid-December. Quite soon then, Beau observed, struggling to keep his tone neutral. Denver would offer more opportunities than our small town. Perhaps, Hannah acknowledged. The salary is certainly better, and the facilities more modern. Charlotte would miss you terribly, Beau said, then added with careful honesty, as would I. Hannah looked up, meeting his gaze directly. Would you, Beau? The simple question demanded a more revealing answer than he'd prepared himself to give. Beau took a deep breath, recognizing that this moment represented a crossroads in their relationship. More than I can properly express, he admitted. You've become important to us both, Hannah. The thought of Silverdale without you is difficult to contemplate. Color rose in Hannah's cheeks. That's part of why I haven't replied to their offer yet. I find myself unexpectedly attached to this place, to certain people in it. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibilities. Beau set aside his coffee cup and leaned forward slightly. Hannah, I'm not a man gifted with words. I can't offer poetry or fancy declarations. But I need you to know that these past months, knowing you, seeing your kindness toward Charlotte, your passion for teaching, Your strength in facing frontier challenges its awakened feelings I thought had died with Mary. Hannah's eyes widened slightly at his directness. Beau, please, let me finish, he requested. I don't presume to know your feelings, and I understand that a widower with a ranch that barely breaks even and an 8-year-old daughter isn't what most women dream of. But if there's any chance that you might consider a future that includes us, I'd be honored to court you properly, with all the respect you deserve. The crackling of the fire filled the silence that followed his declaration. Hannah's expression was unreadable for a moment, then softened into something that made Beau's heart beat faster. I came to Wyoming seeking purpose, independence, a place where I could define myself beyond Boston society's narrow expectations, she said slowly. I never imagined finding a family as well. She reached across the space between them to take his hand. I've grown to care deeply for Charlotte and for you, Beau, more than I thought wise to admit, given your ongoing grief for Mary. Mary will always be part of me, Beau acknowledged. Part of Charlotte, but loving her doesn't prevent me from loving again something I've only recently come to understand. Hannah's fingers tightened around his. In that case, I would welcome your courtship, Beau Quincy, and I believe I'll decline Denver's offer, regardless of its outcome. Joy, unexpected and powerful, surged through Beau. With careful restraint, he lifted Hannah's hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. I'll do everything in my power to ensure you never regret that decision. Hannah smiled, the warmth in her eyes promising possibilities that had seemed beyond reach just months ago. I already know I won't. The following weeks brought a tentative blossoming of their relationship. Beau began riding into town on Wednesday evenings as well as Fridays, sometimes bringing Hannah wildflowers or practical gifts like fresh eggs or early winter vegetables from his root cellar. They would walk together after church on Sundays, their conversations ranging from educational philosophy to ranch management to childhood memories. Charlotte observed these developments with keen interest, though neither adult explicitly explained the changing nature of their relationship. Her own bond with Hannah continued to deepen, particularly after Hannah began including her in Wednesday evening activities, baking bread together, learning simple embroidery stitches, or reading aloud from novels Hannah had brought from Boston. As November drew to a close and preparations for Christmas began in Silverdale, Beau found himself contemplating more permanent arrangements. The school term would break for 2 weeks over the holiday, and Charlotte would return to the ranch full-time during that period. The separation from Hannah during this time felt increasingly unacceptable, particularly as their feelings for each other had grown more defined with each passing week. One Sunday afternoon, as they walked along the creek south of town, Beau broached the subject that had been occupying his thoughts. I'd like to invite you to spend Christmas at the ranch, he said, watching Hannah's profile as she studied a cluster of winter berries on a nearby bush. We keep things simple, but Charlotte and I have our traditions. It would mean a great deal to us both if you'd join us. Hannah turned to him, pleasure evident in her expression. I'd like that very much. Are you certain it's proper, though? The town has been remarkably accepting of our courtship, but Mrs. Jenkins has already agreed to accompany you, Beau informed her with a slight smile. She'll bring her famous mincemeat pies and serve as chaperone to satisfy propriety. Hannah laughed. You've thought of everything. I've tried to, Beau admitted. Truth is, Hannah, I find myself thinking ahead more than I have in years, making plans beyond just surviving until the next season. Hannah's expression softened. That's a good thing, Beau. It is, he agreed, largely thanks to you. He took her hand, guiding her to a fallen log where they could sit overlooking the water. There's something else I'd like to discuss with you if I may, of course. Beau collected his thoughts carefully. The school board approached me last week about building an addition to the schoolhouse living quarters attached to the back, more substantial than your current cottage. They're hoping to make the teaching position more attractive long-term. That's very forward-thinking of them, Hannah observed. It is, Beau agreed, and it got me thinking about alternatives. He met her gaze directly. Hannah, I know we've only been courting a short while, but my feelings for you are settled. I believe yours may be as well. Hannah nodded, color rising in her cheeks. They are. In that case, I'd like to propose a different arrangement, one that would benefit us all, I think. Beau took both her hands in his. The ranch house needs expansion anyway. Charlotte's growing, needs her own proper bedroom. What if we were to build that addition with you in mind? A place that could be yours and, God willing, ours together someday. Hannah's eyes widened slightly. Beau, are you not formally proposing marriage? Not yet, Beau clarified. That deserves to be done properly, with a ring and perhaps not sitting on a fallen log in November. This drew a smile from Hannah. But I am asking if you'd consider a future where your home is with us, where Charlotte has the mother's influence she needs, where we build something lasting together. Emotion filled Hannah's eyes. I've spent my life seeking purpose, belonging, she said softly, first in books, then in teaching. I came to Wyoming believing my calling was solely education, but knowing you and Charlotte has shown me that purpose can encompass more than one kind of fulfillment. Is that a yes to considering the possibility? Beau asked, hope rising in his chest. It's more than that, Hannah replied, squeezing his hands. It's a yes to the future you're describing, Beau, whenever and however it unfolds. The kiss that followed was gentle, a promise rather than a passion, but it sealed the understanding between them with more certainty than words alone could convey. Christmas at the Quincy Ranch exceeded Hannah's every expectation. Beau and Charlotte had decorated with simple but heartfelt touches, pine boughs over the fireplace, red ribbons tied to the curtain rods. A small tree adorned with ornaments Hannah recognized as homemade by Charlotte's hand. Mrs. Jenkins proved an amiable chaperone, dividing her time between helping in the kitchen and dozing by the fire with Charlotte's cat on her lap. Her presence allowed Beau and Hannah moments of privacy on the porch in the crisp evening air, wrapped in blankets against the December cold, discussing dreams and plans for the coming year. On Christmas Eve, after Charlotte had finally succumbed to sleep despite her excitement for the following day, Beau led Hannah to the barn, where he unveiled his gift, a rocking chair he'd crafted in secret over the past weeks. The wood sanded to satin smoothness and carved with a pattern of intertwining wildflowers. It's beautiful, Hannah breathed, running her fingers over the detailed workmanship. You made this, Beau nodded, a hint of pride in his expression. Mary always wanted a proper rocking chair, never got around to making her one. He hesitated briefly. I thought this could be the first piece of furniture for our future together, if you're willing. From his pocket, he withdrew a small box. Inside lay a ring not elaborate or expensive, but thoughtfully chosen. A simple gold band set with a small pearl surrounded by tiny garnets. This belonged to my grandmother, Beau explained. My mother gave it to me before we left for Wyoming, said to save it for when I found someone special. He took Hannah's hand gently. I can't imagine anyone more deserving to wear it. Hannah Fairchild, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Tears welled in Hannah's eyes as she nodded. Yes, Beau, with all my heart, yes. They agreed to a spring wedding after the worst of winter had passed, but before the demands of planting season became too pressing. The announcement at church the Sunday after Christmas caused a flurry of excitement in Silverdale, with most townspeople expressing genuine pleasure at the match. Charlotte, however, received the news with unexpected solemnity. Though she'd grown increasingly attached to Hannah and obviously enjoyed their time together, the formal acknowledgement of changing family dynamics prompted questions Beau should have anticipated. Will Hannah be my mother now? She asked that evening as Beau tucked her into bed. She'll be your stepmother, Beau explained carefully. That means she'll live with us and help care for you, but she knows she can never replace your real mother. Charlotte considered this, her expression thoughtful. But Mama's in heaven, she can't come back. That's true, Wildflower. But she's still your mother, always will be. Hannah tells me stories like Mama did, Charlotte continued, working through her thoughts aloud, and she helps me with my hair and teaches me things. She cares about you very much, Beau affirmed. Charlotte was quiet for a long moment, then looked up with serious blue eyes. I think Mama would like Hannah, don't you, Papa? The simple question threatened to undo Beau completely. Yes, he managed past the tightness in his throat. I think she would. Then it's all right if Hannah becomes part of our family, Charlotte decided, but I'll still remember Mama. Always, Beau promised, kissing her forehead. "We both will." As winter deepened into January and February, preparations for both the wedding and the ranch house expansion proceeded. Town craftsmen volunteered labor in exchange for Beau's help with their various projects, while the women of Silverdale organized sewing circles to create household linens for the newly expanded family. Hannah continued teaching, her dedication to her students undiminished by her upcoming change in circumstances. If anything, her passion for education seemed to grow, perhaps because she no longer felt torn between her professional calling and personal fulfillment. By early April, when the first wildflowers began to appear on the prairie, the ranch house addition was complete a new bedroom for Charlotte, an expanded kitchen with windows that caught the morning light, and a proper parlor where Hannah's books could line the shelves alongside Mary's preserved treasures. The wedding took place on a perfect spring day, with blue skies stretching endlessly overhead and meadowlarks singing from fence posts around the churchyard. Charlotte served as Hannah's attendant, proudly carrying a bouquet matching the bride's and wearing a new dress that Hannah had helped her sew for the occasion. The ceremony itself was brief but heartfelt, with Reverend Wilson emphasizing the creation of a blended family rather than simply the union of man and wife. When Beau and Hannah exchanged vows, Charlotte stood between them, her small hand resting in Hannah's as a symbol of the bonds being formed that day. The celebration afterward spread across the churchyard and into the schoolhouse, with tables laden with food contributed by every household in the community. Dancing continued well into the evening, with even the most reserved ranchers taking a turn around the floor in honor of the occasion. As twilight deepened, Beau found himself standing slightly apart from the festivities, watching Hannah dance with Charlotte, both of them laughing as they attempted an elaborate twirl. The sight filled him with profound gratitude for second chances, for unexpected joy, for the resilience of the human heart. Mrs. Jenkins appeared at his elbow, following his gaze with a knowing smile. "Mary would approve," she said quietly. "Always said you were too young to be alone forever." Beau looked at her in surprise. "Mary said that," Mrs. Jenkins nodded. "Winter before she passed, when she was helping with the church quilting, said if anything ever happened to her, she hoped you'd find someone to love Charlotte like she did." The older woman patted his arm. "Think you've done right by both of them, Beau Quincy." As Mrs. Jenkins moved away, Beau felt a curious peace settle over him, as if the final thread of guilt he'd carried about loving again had been gently untangled. When Hannah approached a moment later, her eyes bright with happiness, he drew her into his arms without reservation. "Ready to head home, Mrs. Quincy?" he asked, still savoring the newness of the name. Hannah smiled up at him. "More than ready." They collected Charlotte, who protested briefly at leaving the celebration, but was visibly tiring despite her excitement. The three of them rode home together in the wagon Beau had decorated with ribbons and spring flowers for the occasion. Charlotte nestled between them beneath a warm blanket against the evening chill. As they approached the ranch house, its windows glowing with welcome light left by neighbors who had prepared the home for their return, Charlotte stirred from her half-doze. "It looks pretty," she murmured, gazing at the lanterns illuminating the path to the door, the fresh-swept porch with Hannah's rocking chair positioned just so, the new curtains visible through the windows. "It does indeed," Hannah agreed, her arm around Charlotte's shoulders. As Beau helped them both down from the wagon, Charlotte looked up at Hannah with sudden intensity. "I'm glad you're here with us," she said. "I've missed having a mother." Hannah knelt to meet Charlotte at eye level, her expression solemn with understanding. "Your mother will always be part of you, Charlotte. I would never try to take her place in your heart." "I know," Charlotte replied with childish directness, "but Papa says hearts can grow big enough for lots of love." She reached up to touch Hannah's cheek. "I've been waiting for someone like you for a long time." Tears welled in Hannah's eyes as she gathered Charlotte close. "And I've been looking for somewhere to belong," she whispered against the child's hair. "For a family to love." Charlotte's arms tightened around Hannah's neck. "You have one now," she said simply. Beau watched them, his own vision blurring with emotion. The journey from grief to this moment had been longer and harder than he could have imagined that terrible day when he'd lost Mary. Yet standing here, witnessing the healing power of new bonds being formed while honoring those that came before, he felt Mary's presence not as a ghost of the past, but as a foundation for the future they were building together. As Hannah stood with Charlotte still in her embrace, Beau joined them, his arms encircling them both. Together, they turned toward their home, not just the physical structure before them, but the more profound shelter they had found in each other's hearts. "Welcome home," Beau said softly, the words meant for both Hannah and himself. "Welcome to our new beginning."